Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Casey La Rochelle. I'm zooming in from Nanaimo territory in Nanaimo, and I'm with special projects within Finesse. I put my contact information in the chat, and welcome today to the First Nations information session. And the topic is building air ambulance heliports. And this is done in collaboration with First Nations Health Authority, as well as the BC Emergency Health Services of the Provincial Health Services. As usual, we're recording the information session, and we'll put it on our webinar playlist online along with the presentation materials. I'd like to start out, I'll call upon people on the screen. If you can introduce yourself and the position you hold within your community organization, any expectations you have of the meeting, and if you have a specific question about air ambulance heliports, feel free to ask that question. So I will start on my screen and call upon Greg from FNHA.
Thank you, Casey. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Greg Shea. I'm calling in today from Squamish territory. I'm from the Helipad First Nation. I serve as a vice president at FNHA responsible for health infrastructure and development. And I'm here to learn a little bit more and hear from the team. We also have a brief presentation to share some of the work that we have been doing as well. So we look forward to sharing some information. Thanks, Casey.
Thank you, Greg. Sean, EPC with Nisconnet. Welcome.
Good afternoon, Casey. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you just fine.
Okay, good. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Sean McCarthy. I'm EPC with the Nisconnet Indian Band. I'm looking forward to this presentation because I think everybody requires a heliport for the convenience of getting people to and from emergency situations. And I'm interested in what the group has to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Mark Fitzmaurice, good to run into you again, Mark.
Nice to see you again, Casey. Thank you. I am Mark Fitzmaurice. I'm Director of Capital Infrastructure on the Health Infrastructure team for the First Nation Health Authority. Working today from the unceded territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh. And I'm just interested in hearing more about how the operations work with relations to helicopter landing pads. Thank you.
Well, you're very welcome, Mark. Scott Bailey.
Yes, thank you, Casey. You can hear me okay?
Absolutely.
My name is Scott Bailey. I'm a senior project manager with Colliers Project Leaders, working on behalf of First Nations Health Authority, and yeah, working a lot with assessing communities for helipads and opportunities for where that might exist. So very interested in learning and seeing what you guys have developed here, and hoping it can kind of further develop into more communities. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome, Scott. Ian Lightbody.
Hi, Ian Lightbody here from BC Emergency Health Services. I'm speaking today from the traditional unceded territory of the Wasanit people, home of the Sartlip Sakom and Pakwishkin nations. I'm the manager of aviation operations at BC Emergency Health Services, and so I help manage our aircraft. Although I don't go flying anymore, I was a former helicopter pilot.
Good to have you here. Andrea Stelter.
Good day, everyone. Still trying to figure out electronics in this day and age. I'm Andrew Stelter, the Emergency Program Coordinator and the Wildfire Recovery Manager for Squamish-Secwepemcúlecw. We do have a space that once was zoned, I guess, as a airstrip. But we still see a lot of helicopters come through and try to land there. So just interested in learning a little bit more information about the program and what requirements are for if we were to offer up a space for the purposes. Thanks.
Thank you, Andrea. Cameron Lulua.
Hello, this is Camarillo, the EPC for Panicotin, Maya Valley. And well, I'm here because we have a landing port for the helicopter between the band office and the health center, but it's not exactly that clear. I would like to learn more.
Thank you, Cameron. Ida Peter.
Hi, Ida Peter from Chilaf, and I'm just interested in listening in on the presentation. Thank you.
Oh, you're very welcome. Jenny Gunn.
Hello, everybody. I'm the emergency management coordinator for Malahat Nation, and I'm here just to see if we have the capacity for something like this, just to bring back some information to the team, just to see if it's something that's feasible or reasonable for us to do. We're working on updating emergency plans, evacuation plans, and all the plans. So very interested to hear all about this today. Thank you.
Thank you, Jenny. Christina Kelly.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Christina Kelly. I'm coming to you today from the unceded territories of the Stalo and Lakamo peoples, where I am the Emergency Program Manager, Regional Director of Emergency Support Services for Nations, and Fire Stewardship Team Lead. And I guess my question today would be, how big of an area do we need to have to build one of these sites? Thank you.
Very good question. Thank you. Philly. If you're able to introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Philly Peters. I'm from Chilaf, Health Director, and I'm interested in it for the heliport for our community because sometimes we get isolated from floods, fires, snow slides, and we have emergencies where we can't get out. Thanks.
Thank you. Great to see a health director here. David Carson. Good to see you, David.
Thank you, Casey. Good day, everyone. I'm calling in from Wasanich territories, representing a number of communities, and I want to thank Casey for the opportunity. He's always offering all these different opportunities. Thank you, Casey.
Oh, you're very welcome. And Jim Christensen, UBC. Thank you so much for making the time, Jim.
Oh, it's an honor, and thanks for the invite, Casey. I'm Jim Christensen. I'm an emergency physician and a researcher. Currently, the main project I'm involved with is with 4 remote New Chalmers communities in the west coast of Vancouver Island, and trying to figure out how to do various things, including advocacy, to improve the emergency care for patients who need it. It's clear from the communities that extrication out of the community is not what it needs to be. And so we're in the process of advocating for helicopter access to the 4 communities that we work directly with. And I'm currently calling in actually from I'm on holidays and calling in from Whistler, from the Squamish and Lillooet nations. And so I'm very interested in, I'm not in any ways knowledgeable about this. And as we advocate for this to be standard in remote communities, at least, I'd just like to understand more about what that means, because I know it's more complex than I sometimes think.
Thank you, Jim, and I'm hoping the project you're involved in is successful and it can be shared with us in the future. Edward Robinson.
I'm Edward Robinson, Director of Emergencies for Kitcat First Nation. I just come on to hear what everybody has to say and what everybody's running into with difficulties and helipads.
Thank you for making the time. Deborah Douglas.
Hello, everybody. I'm Deborah Douglas. I work for GM First Nation. I'm the Emergency Program Coordinator, and I'm also part of the ESS for Nations team. And today we're just looking at the property size that we would need that would be required for the landing station. And that's most of the information we're looking for. Thank you.
Thank you, Deborah. Clint Williams.
Good afternoon. Good to see you again, Casey. I'm with the Not-So-Much Tribal Council, the Emergency Preparedness Advisor. Excited to see if there's any opportunities for helping some of our more isolated communities to develop some proper helipads. I've been involved with the more mountainside helipads, but not really kind of community helipads. But I'm sure there's a lot of similarities. But looking forward to gathering some new information to bring back to our communities. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome, Clint. Thanks for being here. Kathy Robinson.
Hi, good afternoon. Kathy Robinson here in Hartley Bay, along with Ed Robinson. I'm the Emergency Program Coordinator and looking forward to hearing the information.
Thank you very much, Kathy. Randy Lee Morgan, thank you for making the time. I know you're busy these days.
Good afternoon. My name is Randy Lee Morgan. I'm the EPC for Gitwangak First Nation. I'm also the Assistant Chief and First Responder within our Gitwangak Volunteer Fire Department. I'm really excited and happy to be joining you guys. I have lots to learn, and being a part of our first responders, I definitely want to see what I can learn from this presentation and hopefully bring back to our community.
Thank you, Randy Lee. Patrick Adrian.
Hello, my name's Patrick Adrian. I'm a Chalath council member, also part of the local volunteer fire department, and looking forward to learn what I can.
Thank you very much, Patrick. Jolene Rendelik.
Hello. Hi, Casey. Glad to be here on the community safety for Chalath, and great subject, and I'm glad to be here. Thanks.
Oh, you're very welcome. I appreciate you making the time. Byron Harry, Tla'amin Nation.
Hey, Casey. Just here to follow up to see if there's anything new about landing zones and all that. I'm Fire Chief at Tla'amin, and just excited about any information that I can bring forward that I might not, who knows.
Good to see you again. Jeremiah Louie.
Good afternoon. My name is Jeremiah Lewis, and I'm here with Chantel. We're with Tackle Nations Mercy Services, and we just would like to get a little more information on what we have as a remote community. We actually haven't seen an ambulance up here for over a year. It's just helicopter when they come in. So we think we have an okay pad, just seeing how we can make it better.
Thank you, Jeremiah. I hope you're all doing well in your neck of the woods. Keenan Kipp.
Hi, everyone. My name's Keenan Kipp. I work with Finesse. I support the preparedness and recovery teams. I'm just here to learn and take some notes for some of our team members that weren't able to attend today. Thanks for having me.
You're very welcome. Nathan Coombs.
Yeah, good afternoon, Casey and everyone else. Yeah, I'm the Fire Services Manager for Finesse, and I work with all the fire departments in the province here. So just trying to get some takeaways that we can share with the other departments that aren't here. And I'm involved with the fire department here in Gitxsan territory where I live. So good information to take back. Thank you.
Thank you, Nathan. Anthony Hatfield. Good to see you, Anthony.
Yeah, hi Casey. Hi everybody. Good afternoon. Anthony Hadfield, Emergency Manager with Indigenous Services Canada, BC region. And thanks for the invite.
You're very welcome. Danica Collins.
Good afternoon. I'm with the Tecumseh Tecumseh. I'm the Emergency and Community Support Assistant, and I look forward to learning some more about this. Thank you.
Oh, you're so welcome. Bob Mills.
Good afternoon. Thanks, Casey. My name is Bob Mills. I'm the Manager of Special Projects with First Nations Emergency Services Society. I'm originally from Haida Gwaii, and I'm coming to you from the traditional territory of the Ntlaka'pamux people, and what is now known as the City of Merritt, and I work with Casey.
Thank you,
Just
Bob.
here to listen in, sorry.
Thank you, Bob. Allison Lohman.
Good, not morning, good afternoon. Alison Lohman, I'm with the preparedness team. I'm here to learn and to see how we can incorporate some of these best practices and procedures into our emergency plans, evacuation plans, and emergency response templates that we have for communities if they request them.
Awesome. If you can throw your name and email in the chat, I'm sure people will contact you if they have questions about what we can do to support them. Cindy. If you're able to introduce yourself, Cindy. We can circle back. It's okay. Jenny Freeman.
Hi, Casey. Hi, everyone. Sorry, it always takes me a while to unclick the mute in the video. Thank you so much for organizing this, Casey, and thank you to Ian for sharing all the information. I'm the Emergency Program Coordinator for Tla'amin Nation, so I'm here today with our Fire Chief, Byron Herring. And I'm really fortunate because I have experience in fire services, so I've been able to take this training or learn about heli landing zones with Ian for a couple of years. And I must say, every time I hear this presentation, I learn something new. I think that it's super important for rural communities to have capacity, which can really be supported via these amazing helicopters and the pilots who fly them. And I'm always keen to learn about what our communities can do to support the pilots. So one of the things that I think is super interesting is just around lighting. So communities that use LED lights, or even when our first responders are responding to incidents with lights on their trucks, I understand from Ian that that can be challenging. So yeah, that's very much something that I learned recently and has been put to good use in our crews. And I'm keen for anything new I can learn today. So thank you to everybody.
Thank you, Jenny. Crystal Camille.
Good day, everyone. Crystal Camille. I'm from the Stockholm Highland First Nation, part of the Secwepemc Nation. I'm the executive assistant here at Finesse, and I'm just here to listen in and learn. Thanks.
Thank you, Crystal. Trudy Peterson.
Good afternoon, everyone. Hopefully you can see me. Just listening for the specs and interesting topic to be presented today. So happy to join.
Thank you, Trudy. Moses Towell, you chuckle sit. Good to see you, Moses.
Thanks, Casey. Good to see you too. Moses Towell, UCHUCKLESIT Emergency Program Coordinator and Resource Development Manager. I'm here to learn as well. It's perfect timing. I actually just had Colliers and as part of an FNHA program to come out to our community to look at a new proposed landing site, and we're working on design. So I'm just trying to get as much information as possible.
Thank you, Moses. Nicole Malcolmson. Good to see you, Nicole.
Thank you for having me, Casey. Nicole Malcolmson here. I'm the community coordinator for the Queesanup project. I reside in Alberni Valley here, and I serve the communities of Ahousaht, Cloquet, Kaikit, Checklisset, and Heshquit. Thanks.
Thank you. Circling back, is there anyone who hasn't had a chance to introduce themselves and a question they may have?
Hi, I'm sorry I couldn't unmute myself earlier. It's Cindy Robinson from Kisukehes. I'm here to listen and learn and also just kind of, I guess maybe, have some dialogue around Clem 2's experience and the partnership they have with FNHA and Spur and Collier in developing the landing zone in Kisukehes territory. Thank you.
Oh, you're very welcome. Last call if there's anyone who hasn't had a chance to introduce themselves. I think we've got everyone. With that being said, I'd like to move along to the next agenda item. Ian Lightbody, if you want to introduce yourself and your topic of building air ambulance heliport. And you can screen share your presentation if you'd like.
Thank you, will do. So make sure I get the right screen here. There we go. So can I just get a thumbs up from somebody that you can see the screen? Perfect, thanks, Corey. Or Casey, sorry. So I'm going to go through a few different things here. This is a presentation I normally give to first responders on setting up a landing zone for our one of our helicopters. So building a heliport for a community, there's some elements that are applicable, but what I'll do is there's a lot of elements that are applicable to setting up a helipad. The difference being if you're setting up a helipad in your community, you're doing something more permanent that you basically won't have to go through the selection criteria here for picking a temporary landing zone, but all the things about picking a temporary landing zone also apply to picking a permanent landing zone. Sorry, and I forgot, Casey told me to go over my background. And I'll do a few other things here, a few other admin points. So my background was I was 32 years in the Air Force. I was a helicopter pilot, flying Sea Kings off of, hold on a sec, my headset's going low. I'm going to switch here. Can you still hear me, Casey? Oh, you're on mute, but it sounds like you can hear me. No, you can't hear me?
Yeah, we could hear you, sorry.
Okay, perfect. So I was 32 years in the Air Force flying helicopters. I worked with then EMBC, now EMCR, for 5 years, from about 2015 to 2019. And 2019, I joined BCHS, where I'm the manager of aviation operations for Rotary Wing, which is another way of saying helicopter for BCHS. So that's my background, a little bit of admin. If there are any questions that come up during the presentation, if you can please try and put them in the chat. And Casey, if I don't see them in the chat, if you could sort of highlight them for me and let me know, and I will I'll try and address them. The other thing is I'm also on call today. There's always an on-call manager. And so if I have to suddenly drop or to pick up the phone for a sec, that's the reason why. Couple of things I'm going to show you. So if I'm going to go to Google here quickly and show you something where you can access all the documents that we are going to look at today. If you put BCHS critical care in a Google search window, it'll pop up. The very first thing that pops up the top on our public facing website or webpage of BCHS is this. And if under related documents here on the right, everything that I'm going to present to you, all the documents I'm going to show you today. So this is the one, how to build an air ambulance heliport for your community. This is the big presentation on how to select and run a landing zone. And then this is the landing zone checklist. So those 3 documents are this one, which is basically sort of like a quick and dirty how to build a air ambulance heliport for a community. One of the things it strongly recommends, it has some sizes in there, but one of the things it strongly recommends is hiring a consultant to do it, because there's a whole bunch of Transport Canada regulations on how to set up a heliport or a helipad, and they will know all those. And FNHA has a program which I think they can talk to you about that is going through part of that. The 2 other documents that are on there, this is the big presentation. that take me about an hour and a bit to go through, depending on how many people have questions. And then this is what I call the quick reference card. All these 3 documents, again, are on that web page on the right-hand side under related documents. And this is designed, it's an 8.5 by 11 two-sided piece of paper. And what it's designed to do is print it out, laminate it, leave it in a vehicle or something like that. And it is all the high points or the really important points from this presentation. And it's designed to twig you and said, hey, I haven't run a landing zone, or I haven't picked a landing zone in a long time. What do I need? What's the important stuff? Go to this quick reference card, pull it out of your clipboard or the back of your vehicle or something like that. And this will give you all the important points right there. Okay, so what I will do is I will go to full screen mode and we'll go through the presentation here. And again, any questions, let me know. So what this course is designed to do is give you the necessary information to select, prepare, and then safely operate a landing zone for one of our helicopters. If you are basically already have an established helipad, like I think I heard there was somebody from Hartley Bay there. Can't remember if it's a full helipad or if it's just a place where we land all the time. You don't have to worry about the select part. You might have to prepare and safely operate would be the part that would be more applicable to you. Course is intended for people who could be running an LZ or a helipad, or training others to do that, but there's nothing wrong with anybody that's going to be helping run the helipad that isn't in charge of it being on this course, because the more people that know this information, the better. This point I will harp on multiple times over the presentation. The final decision to land anywhere results with is in it's the decision of the pilot in command of the helicopter. They are ultimately responsible for the safe operation of the helicopter, the safety of the people on board, and the safety of people on the ground. If there's anything they think is unsafe with the conditions of the landing area, they may decide to not land there, particularly on temporary landing zones that are picked, and used only once. That happens. It does happen from time to time, especially with people who aren't too well versed in picking the landing zones. So I give this course, I do this twice a year. If anybody is interested, we do it regularly, twice a year, and once in the spring, once in the fall. And when I do it with the pilots of each of the companies that fly for us, or some of the pilots. They're usually their chief pilot. And so these are some of the slides that change. They change sometimes from year to year. And these are all the differences from from the spring version. This is the fall version right now. I showed you where the course content is, where you can find it on Google BCHS Critical Care. Look under related documents. If this slide deck is in the invitation that Casey sent out. So these links are good. If you clicked on this, it would take you right to that document. Also, if any of you are interested in continuation CME actually credits, continuing medical education credits. If you know what Learning Hub is, you can sign up for a free, this link, go to it. You can sign up for a free account. There's a course on Learning Hub. They're using a video of one of the presentations I've made. And then there's an exam. You have to get 80% on it. There's about 17 or maybe 20 questions on it. And then you submit the certificate you get at the end to the continuing medical education people, and you can get 2 credits for that. 2 CME credits for passing the exam. So there's the outline. I'm not going to go over it. Casey, just a quick question. Do you want me to sort of breeze over the selection part more because people are more interested in permanent helipads or not changing them all the time? Or do you want me to do that too?
That seems to be probably ideal. Though I assume you're going to cover the emergency last minute thing just to safely use one. Yeah.
Okay, I'll sort of stay, but maybe I'll just breeze over it a little bit more than I would go to it if we were doing it for like a fire department setting it up on the highway or sort of thing. But yeah, I'll breeze over it a little bit more. So why are you getting an air ambulance? Usually a helicopter. Big one is decreasing the transport time to definitive care. Definitive care is usually defined as some sort of major trauma center or some sort of higher level of care. Tends to be Prince George, Kelowna, Kamloops, Vancouver, Victoria, but there are some other ones like Fort St. John, Terrace are major ones in the north too. We have helicopter contracts with 3 dedicated carriers, so they're ones that are on full-time contract with us. And then we have numerous what we call ad hoc carriers. And I'll explain what the difference is between the dedicated and the ad hoc. This information here is most applicable to our dedicated carriers, but generally speaking, this information will be good to any helicopter. You'll just have to sort of scale things up or down depending on the size of the helicopter. This Sikorsky S-76 Fleet C+, flown by Helijet. It's in Vancouver and Rupert. There seats up to 4 medics and 2 patients. In reality, you'll normally see 2 medics and 1 patient. We tend to, because you're getting a helicopter and somebody's pretty sick, if you're getting a helicopter, the medics tend not to want to look after more than 1 patient at one time because they don't like splitting their time up. So you'll usually, if it's possible, get more than 1 helicopter. Yeah, they're available 24/7. They've got night vision goggles, and I'll explain what that means later. Basically means they can fly at night where most other helicopters can't. Big thing, there's a picture of interior. This cot is a specially modified cot, approved. It has some modifications approved by Transport Canada to secure it inside the helicopter here so that it won't become a missile and, sort of break free and fly forward if the aircraft crashes for whatever reason. If the cot isn't returned to the aircraft, they cannot transport patients anymore. It has to be these specific cots. Bell 412 EP or EPI, they're based in Kamloops and Prince George. So the gentleman who was at TACLA, this is the helicopter you would likely see there. And actually, I went up there, I think it was January of this year. I was on a trip up to TACLA flying in the helicopter. They're 12/7 instead of 24/7. They're also night vision goggle equipped so they can fly in the dark. The big difference for this one, it has a striker cot, which is the exact same cot that we have in our ground ambulances. And the nice thing we like about this is if for whatever reason, let's say we're doing what's called a ground intercept. So ground ambulances pick up the patient first is driving towards the hospital, but they deem it important enough, they'll have the ground ambulance pull over. Helicopter will do the ground intercept. Basically, they'll transport the patient. They'll take the striker cot right out of the ground ambulance, pop it right into the helicopter, and the ambulance will take the empty helicopter one, and then they'll get to the hospital that much quicker. This one also has a loud hailer. It's not too overly useful. MD 902, it's out of our Parksville base. This one only takes 2 paramedics and 1 patient. It's 12/7. It also has night vision goggle equipped. It's significantly smaller than our other helicopters. That's why it can. So this one could also take 2 patients. Normally only takes 1 patient, and 2 medics. But this one can only take 1 patient and 2 medics. It won't take anything more than that. They can squeeze a 3rd seat in there sometimes, but it's not that often they do that. This helicopter is maybe about 2/3 the size and weight of the other ones. Big difference, this one has no tail rotor. If you're running tail, this is the tail rotor here in the back and here. So it makes it safer, makes it quieter. But other than that, there's no real difference. Night vision goggles. You might have seen these on the movies. That's what these little tubes are. They hang off the helmet here of the pilots. They're sort of like about the size of toilet paper tubes in front of the pilot, about an inch in front of the pilot's eyes. This is the kind of image you see through them. It's sort of a green and black view. They're great for flying at night. I don't know how we ever flew at night. Well, it's really scary thinking what we did at night before this. But they're huge increase in safety, allowing you to see at night when you're flying around. They are more fatiguing because there's this weight hanging off the end of your head. The visual acuity is not the same as flying during the day. It's about 20/20, instead of 20/20, it's about 20/30 to 20/40. So you don't have the precision of seeing exactly what you see during the day. And you're also seeing basically exactly pretty much like what you'd see looking through a toilet paper tube in front of your eyes. And so you have to move your head around a lot to build up a view of what's going on outside. So you don't have any peripheral vision at all. They do need some light to work. So if you are a long ways away from civilization or significant civilization, there's a thick overcast, there's no moon above it, then the goggles won't work. You might as well be flying in the dark without them. But normally even starlight through cloud is enough light. Obscurance, dust, snow, rain, and smoke, can't see through those. Interestingly, some LED lights don't appear, or a lot of LED lights don't appear on NVGs. The goggles work from the far red to the near infrared, and most of the lights that they see through the goggles are actually the heat from an incandescent bulb. So when we switch to LEDs, there's a lot of lights they don't see now. Twilight, so a setting sun can cause issues, or a rising full moon is basically has the same effect on the goggles. Wires are absolutely impossible to see on the goggles at night, or on the goggles. And as I'll sort of make out, wires are the nemesis, or the sort of the big thing that our helicopters worry about, because A, they're hard to see, and B, if they run into it, it can quite often cause a crash. So those three the slides I went before were our dedicated helicopters, and they all have NVGs. We have about 30 to 40 contracts with other helicopter companies around the province for helicopter services. If, let's say, all our helicopters in one area are busy and we need extra capacity, or if it's a part of the province where we don't normally have a helicopter. And Fort St. John area, the Peace River District, was a good example of that. Where we don't have helicopter service. We actually have a helicopter for the summer there now to help with all the hospital closures, but that normally we wouldn't. And so our dispatch has a huge list of all the companies all over the province that we've already signed a contract with. So we've agreed on mostly how much we're going to pay them on an hourly basis. But they, unlike the other the dedicated ones, which have pilots and aircraft standing by either 24/7 or 12/7, these companies have no obligation to keep a helicopter or pilot standing by. So our dispatch will say, hey, we need a helicopter in Fort St. John. They'll phone up the companies we know that are there and that we have contracts with and said, hey, do you have a pilot and a helicopter that can pick up here and drop off there? If they say yes, then some medics will show up and they'll go on the helicopter and go pick up the patient and transport them. The big difference one of the big differences between these helicopters and our dedicated helicopters here. So our dedicated helicopters are like a ground ambulance. There's oxygen, there's all sorts of medical supplies, there's suction. It's equipped like a ground ambulance, but inside the helicopter. These ones are like panel vans compared to an ambulance. There's nothing inside that's medical other than a stretcher, and the medics have to bring all their stuff with them. They have to bring oxygen, they have to bring all the supplies, they have to bring a monitor if they need that stuff. So it's basically, think of it like a panel van as far as aircraft goes. And there's a huge difference. This is probably the smallest helicopter you'll see. Oops, sorry. And this is one of the bigger ones. So requesting an air ambulance. If you're in just your average person out in the middle of nowhere, 911 is the best way to go. Even and if you're not in the healthcare system. So if you're in the healthcare system at the, let's say, Tackle Landing, if you're in the clinic there, the best way to get the helicopter is going through the clinic. They will get the patient triaged in the transfer system, and the helicopter will get dispatched from our main dispatch center in Vancouver. If you are not in the healthcare system, the best way to go is call 911 and basically get in our triage in our healthcare, or get triaged in the 911 system for an aircraft. We have a single dispatch center in Vancouver that dispatches all our fixed wing and rotary wing aircraft. They are masters of using either hovercraft, Coast Guard boats, military aircraft. Well, first they'll go to our aircraft, but if our aircraft can't do it for whatever reason or aren't available, they will look at all sorts of other ways of doing it. And they've used hovercraft, Coast Guard boats, military aircraft to try and get patients if the patient is that critical. Yeah, so let's talk about that. So what do we need if you're not an established helipad? Big thing, latitude, longitude is a good one. If there's no, especially if you're in the middle of nowhere and there's no sort of recognizable street address. Cross streets or street address is good. Closest city or town, we're 10 mile or 10 kilometers down this road from this town. Street address, location, and no well-known landmarks. We are 10 kilometers up the river from the north end of this lake. That sort of thing would be a good one. If you've done this course in particular, if you can warn of any hazards to the arriving helicopters, wires, towers, big ones, particularly at night, then please do so. And if you have an idea of what the ceiling is around there for the cloud or the visibility, that would be great, but not absolutely necessary. So what we would normally expect, and this would work for both the established ones and the ad hoc landing zones that would be established where needed. We would want somebody who's going to be in charge of the landing zone or the landing pad. If you're doing it on an ad hoc basis, you basically have to pick one of the first responders at the scene, and they're responsible for selecting the landing zone and running it. They should not be involved in any other duties like patient care or anything else like that, because we really want somebody dedicated to the safety of the helicopter landing at the pad or the landing zone. Sometimes that's not possible if you're at a really chaotic first responder scene or really short-staffed, but that's the ideal situation. So what you're going to do, so you're going to coordinate if you're setting up an ad hoc audit with other incident command personnel. So about selecting an LZ, talk about that later. Identify the briefing points, and I've got a whole slide on that later, but there's some of the things you look for. If you have a fire department, it's always good to have the fire department out there for a landing, even at an established helipad, in case something goes wrong. You know, we don't like to think about it, but sometimes they can. You're going to pick your team that's going to run your LZ. This might not be as much needed on established helipads. You might just have one person doing this if it's easy, but we can talk about that in a bit. But if you're running an ad hoc one, for instance, you want to make sure you're controlling access to a place that normally there's no access control. So, for instance, you want to block vehicles if you're using if you're blocking off a road to use the road as an LZ. You need to make sure people are blocking the road so nobody can access it, and ensuring all vehicles and non-essential personnel stay clear. So this is probably the biggest part of running a helipad or running an ad hoc landing zone. If you're selecting an ad hoc LZ, normally you want to be as close to the patient as possible. Sometimes if that's not possible, you know, the helicopter line farther away and you'll transport the paramedics to the patient, but that's where you have to talk to if there's any paramedics on the ground. Or if you're talking to our dispatch, they have emergency physicians on call, and they can always help you make that decision on whether or not you want to try and wait to get a closer landing zone for the paramedics, or get the paramedics on the ground quickly and get them by ground closer to the patient if it's an ad hoc LZ. Yeah, talked about that. This one, basically, the only reason I put these two down here is we've had conflict sometimes with ad hoc LZs between different first responder agencies. An example was there was an accident on the Island Highway here at one point. The helicopter landed really close to the patient, blew a whole bunch of debris from that accident all over the place. Police were upset basically that happened because they were, I think, looking at doing an investigation to see about charging one of the drivers potentially. And the rotor were downwashed as that essentially disturbed the crime scene. And ultimately, there should be an incident commander that if there's disagreement on where the landing zone should be, because something like that might happen, the incident commander should take charge and make that decision. LZ selection, mentioned this. This is a foot stomper in terms of if you do the exam or do the quiz, take the learning up course, do the quiz, this will be a question. Pilot command always has final authority over landing the aircraft or LZ suitability. They may, and if you do select an ad hoc LZ, if you're in charge of that, don't be insulted, or if they do decide to change it, sometimes they see different things from the air that you can't see from the ground, and they might see a better place just a little bit closer or farther away. Somebody was asking about the size there, 40 meters by 40 meters-ish is roughly what you want to do. We've had some people count on getting the small black helo, the 902, and they end up getting the bigger one, and then they get burned because they haven't they didn't pick something that was 40 by 40, because the 902 can fit into smaller locations. But this is the one you should count on. All our new helicopters we're getting will be this is the size they'll need. Basically, the LZ should be about 50 meters-ish away from an accident or a patient care location. If you have a helipad right next to a healthcare clinic or clinical facility, I'm thinking of the one in Takla that I went to, that's fine, because that's what you're used to, that's what you know, and you've got lots, or the building protects the patient inside there. Yeah, downwind of the scene, basically, unless it's hazmat, in which case it can be crosswind or very far upwind if there's a fire burning or something like that. If you're doing an LZ, an ad hoc one on like a gravel road, and you have a fire department to wet down the area, that's very, very helpful. And I've got a slide on why that's important later. because dust or fresh snow can cause either brownout or whiteout conditions that can be disastrous for the helicopter if it's not either warned, if you don't warn the pilots, or if it's not wet down, let's say. If you're doing an ad hoc LZ, pay attention to if there's ditches or fences. Trying to get a cot across ditches or fences can be really, really difficult. And the LZ surface needs to be firm, well drained, and preferably not covered in manure. That happened recently where they went to a manure field that was a field that had just been spread with manure at night, and it just anyway, it was not a very nice smelling helicopter after that trip. Yeah, and when I say firm, you know, well drained, the helicopters are about the heaviest they weigh will probably be about 12,000 pounds. So, you know, well drained grass fields, gravel, you know, asphalt, concrete are all great sort of things. The pilots may, you know, take a look at the field, try setting down, and if it's too soft, they may pick up and move somewhere else. 5 degrees is about the maximum slope. The helicopters can land up to 10 degrees, but if you're trying to push a patient up into the helicopter, 5 degrees is all you really want to do. Preferably level, of course. So 5 minutes back from the helicopter, what we normally like is for the LZ manager to put on a safety vest, preferably a different color from the other ones if there's other people around there. But if they're not, if it's not the different color, that's fine. But if you do have a different color, that's great. Back to the winds, arms raised, and then when the helo confirms visual with the LZ manager point in the landing directions, I got a picture of that later. Establish radio comms, and I've got a slide on that one too. Brief the helicopter, talk about that one. Advise when the LZ is prepared and locked down. Basically, you've got access is controlled. You're sure there's no foreign objects around there that are going to pick up and damage the helicopter or people. And then you have to maintain that secure LZ until the flight crew tells you otherwise. Never, ever, ever approach the helicopter when there's anything turning. So even after you hear the engine shut down, and you'll hear the engine, it's quite obvious when the engine shut down, the rotor will keep turning and there's a rotor brake. It'll take about 30 seconds or so after the rotor shut down or the engine shut down for the rotor to stop. Don't ever approach the aircraft until the pilots ask you to. So we'd really, really like it if you could get a radio to talk to the helicopter. This number, 148.655, is called PEPCORD 1. If you're at all involved in ground search and rescue, you'll have this frequency in your radios. But this is the frequency we are giving out for anybody, or that we ask for anybody to have if they want to talk to one of our helicopters. If for whatever reason you don't have that frequency or you can't get that frequency in your radio, let our dispatch know, go through the system and work backwards. Let our dispatch know what frequency you are on if you are on a radio frequency. And most of our helicopters have the ability to dial up pretty well any frequency that you can do. When the landing's happening, the only two things that should be on the radio are the LZ manager and the helicopter. There should never be anybody else there, because what the LZ manager is going to do is if they see anything bad happening, they're going to call the landing to abort. And if there's a lot of other chatter on the radio at the time, the LZ manager won't be able to do it because he'll be stepped on the radio. And I'll talk about how you can get PEPCORD 1 up here if you don't have it. So if you were briefing the helicopter, and particularly for an ad hoc LZ, you'd go, if you use BCAS air ambulance for the helicopter, you say, you know, BCAS air ambulance, this is LZ manager. You could say, if you were tackle landing or Hartley Bay, say this is Hartley Bay LZ manager. The LZ is secure and ready for landing, or the LZ is, we're still preparing it, 5 minutes back. And then you could call later on and say, you're ready. If it's a ad hoc LZ that they don't know where it is, you tell them where it is and return cardinal references. So say you would say the LZ, let's say they haven't seen you yet. The LZ is 5 miles to the north of the road intersection, or 3 kilometers down up north of the end of the lake, or this mountain, or some well-known sort of cardinal landmark, and always north, south, east, west. Don't say to the left of you, to the right of you. What the LZ is marked with, if for permanent helipads, that's not an issue. Your estimate of wind speed directions and any hazards, and I'll talk about that later. If you do not have Pepcord 1 in your, if you have radios and you don't have Pepcord 1 in it and you need, or you can get Pepcord, or you want to get Pepcord 1, I can help facilitate that. It's an EMCR. I haven't changed still the old email here, but email me and I can help support that application for you. And I'm happy to do so because that really helps our helicopters. Yeah, because if you can talk to the helicopters, if they're for some reason they see something they're not too sure about, they say, hey, you know, there's a tarp on a something or other that's just to the side of the helipad. I would want to make sure that that's tied down so it doesn't get carried off by the rotor downwash. They can talk to somebody on the ground, to somebody and say, oh yeah, that's tied down, or no, we'll just go check it to make sure. That is just so much easier to them than going out there looking at it saying, I'm not sure, I'm not comfortable landing there and going somewhere else. So talking on the radio really helps clear up a lot of things. So is your LZ ready? Time is the essence because time is of the essence in the sense you're getting an aircraft because somebody's having a bad day, right? And somebody needs to get to that higher level of care quickly. But we don't want to have the aircraft land quickly somewhere such that the landing zone or the helipad wasn't ready. Somebody gets hurt effectively, right? Either a piece of debris from the ground starts flying away, or the helicopter gets damaged for some reason and then it can't transport the patient anymore. We're all about trying to make sure this can be done safely, both for people on the ground, the patient, and the crew of the aircraft. And so if you're not ready for whatever reason at your landing zone, please tell them, make it clear to them that you're not ready and that you need more time. They'll gladly orbit and wait for you to be ready to make sure that everything is done safely. Approach departure path. Normally there's an approach and departure path. It's normally always into wind, but the obstacles can be a factor. Large trees, telephone or large poles, high ground in certain areas. But if there are this is where the knowledge of these obstacles was really helpful. If it's a permanent place, they'll probably they would have cataloged a lot of these already. For instance, Sackle Landing, I know they've cataloged all of those landing areas or all the obstacles. If you're doing an ad hoc one, quick way to identify hazards: stand in the middle of where you think or where the landing zone is, put your arm up at 45 degrees, turn in a circle. Everything above your fingertips is a hazard that you should identify to the helicopter. And so from here, you see the person would stand, this is the tail of the helicopter here, but stand turn around 45 degree, arm up 45 degrees, turn around in a circle, and you'd say, and always identify them in cardinal directions too, like trees to the north, lampposts to the north and east. So here's trees to the north and lampposts to the north and east, for instance, something like that. Wires, talked about those again from the ground. They seem really obvious, really easy to see. This picture is actually taken from the inside of a helicopter. You can see the reflection of the glass inside here. There's wires going down the side of the road. That's why they're so hard to see. If you're setting up an ad hoc LZ, the best way to identify them is parked vehicles underneath them. And when you're talking to them on the radio, you can say, hey, some of the obstacles, there's wires running along the edge of the field, north to south, and there's two vehicles parked underneath them so that they know where, and they can see the vehicles. They look at them and say, okay, stay away from that. That's where the wires are. Night, yes, case study. So this is not as applicable to you guys, but I'll go through it quickly. Basically, this is a U.S. case study. The helicopter was contacted. The LZ manager told them there's high voltage wires to the south of the LZ, but the site was marked with 4 illuminated orange cones. These are these high tension wires here. There's another set of wires here, lower powered ones. Here, this is a terrible LZ selection. He put the LZ right under these high tension lines, and the helicopter basically at night couldn't see the wire, ran into one of these. One of the lines and cut it. Like a far better place for an LZ would have been here or somewhere up north, but basically nowhere close to these power lines. That was the helicopter on the ground. Unfortunately, the patient that was supposed to pick up died because they couldn't. The helicopter obviously wasn't going anywhere after it hit the power lines. Yeah, very poor selection of the landing zone. Pilot can see the towers, but not the wires. He attempted to use the landing light, and unfortunately, the patient passed to the scene. And that's the worst case scenario. We don't want to. Everybody in the helicopter was okay, but the patient unfortunately wasn't, that they were supposed to transport. Yeah, so stay away from power lines. Usually, we prefer 50 meters from power lines, but if you're going to be any closer to that, let the LZ manager, or the LZ manager should brief the aircraft. Yeah, parked vehicles are under power lines or lights. Illuminate towers with lights. That's another way of sort of identifying them, particularly at night. Landing point selection. I'm gonna pass on this one here because, again, not as applicable if you're doing a permanent helipad. The big thing is basically you want something clear of as many obstacles if you're doing an ad hoc one: tree stumps, fire hydrants. Like 1 or 2 of those things might be okay, but more than that is definitely not okay. You got to be careful. Artificial turf and septic fields. Basically, the helicopter could either collapse through the septic field, and they'll heavy enough, artificial turf will leave a permanent divot in it, and they'd be very, very upset people for a sports field. So we talked about the safety area should be about 40 by 40. There's going to be an area inside there, the smaller area that they'll land inside, that's about 8 meters by 8 meters. Debris, we'll talk about what kind of debris that can propel by the rotor downwash. Talked about the slope. 5 degrees is really the maps we really want to see. Free of any of these things to the greatest extent, and downwind from the scene. And I'm going to show you. So this person here is, let's say they're going to land in this field, and what they're doing is, the good thing is they're walking the field. There should really be a line of them across here, because there could be something hidden in this grass that you don't see. There could be a rock, there could be a tree stump, there could be a bunch of garbage that's going to get picked up by the rotor downwash. Ditches, like close to the side of the road, great place to collect all sorts of garbage that could pick up by the rotor downwash. All that stuff needs to be identified, either picked up if it's garbage, or secured if it can't move, or identified to the helicopter as a potential obstacle, because worst case scenario is it pokes a hole in the belly of the helicopter, and then the helicopter's not going anywhere until it gets fixed. So we talked about identifying the LZ during the day, high vis vest, back to the wind, arms raised. These are different ways of identifying an ad hoc LZ. If you've got a permanent one, you don't need to do this, because you'll have presumably some sort of either concrete asphalt and it's painted with a big H on it of some sort. Fluorescent paint works great on snow in the winter. Some of the ad hoc ones, they want to use smoke, pop smokes into the 10 or 2 o'clock position of the LZ, but that's more for the ad hoc ones. Night, same high vis vest, back to the winds, arms raised. If you have those jackets, the fire departments have them that have reflection on the ends of the cuffs, those also work well. Or if you have those wands that you use for traffic control that have the sort of cones on the top that can be red or green, those also work well. Turbo flares, talked about these LED beacons. They can be great to sort of mark the outline of a night landing zone. Sometimes the LEDs aren't visible on NVGs. If you contact me, I can get you the names of some that are visible on NVGs. But even if you have ones already and they aren't visible on NVGs, that's okay. Just tell the pilots you've put them out there, and they can look around the goggles to see if they can see the turbo flares. Any sort of flashing strobes that are anywhere close to the landing zone, the pilots will usually ask you to turn them off. If you're doing an ad hoc one at night, particularly, strobes are a great way to get their attention to say, hey, come over here. And then once they get closer and come in for landing, they'll probably ask them to be turned on steady or turned off. Vehicles with headlights 30 to 50 feet away, lights on low, and I've got a great diagram for this. Never, ever, ever shine lights directly at the helicopter. And use spotlights to mark obstacles and poles with wires. Some fire departments I've seen and some ground search and rescue organizations have those lights that sort of come up from, like, on a pole, extend on a pole, and then they can turn the lights in different directions depending on to illuminate different parts or different areas. If you can illuminate, if there's a pole or tower or something like that that's close to the landing zone, that's a great way to mark it with that light and pointing straight up or straight at the pole. The LZ manager today, so I talked about hands up, land here, and then you'll point your arm straight ahead, and I've got another one to that. The same thing at night with flashlights, or the ones with the traffic cones, or for traffic control with the cones are really good. Unsafe, if basically crossing your arms back and forth, that's the abort. Basically, if there's something unsafe about the landing zone, don't land here. And you'd call abort on the radio. So here's the diagram that puts it all together. This diagram is also on the back of the quick reference card. And so the wind's coming from the top to the bottom. LZ manager is over here, and there are safety vests. If there's a different colored turbo flare, you can put it here, or a different colored light. If you're in a permanent pad, these would all be the same color. You're never going to have a different, you won't have a different light because you don't know which direction the wind's going to come. The wind doesn't always come from the same direction. So put your LZ manager back to the wind, and the helicopter would normally come at this way and then land in here. So this is your 40 meters. And then this area is smaller, and in here is the area where they touch down. If this was an ad hoc LZ and there's maybe a few stumps or rocks or something like that in there, the helicopter may come in for landing, sort of hover for a bit, look at where the let's say a fire hydrant or a tree stump or a couple of rocks are, but it's good enough for them to land. They may maneuver around here a bit and then set themselves down. If this was tackle landing, where this was the air, if you're going off in this direction to the clinic, and let's say the helicopter came in this way, what they'll do is they'll normally turn around to put, I think it's the left side. They would turn around to put the left side of the helicopter towards the clinic so that the cot would come straight off and go straight down to the clinic. So you may see them come in here, maneuver around a bit, depending on, because they'll always try and put the cot where the cot's going to get loaded, unloaded closest to the patient, and then they'll set down. They may also take a curved approach path. So let's say for whatever reason you had, let's say like that big set of power lines over here. They may come into the side and then do a last minute turn to the right and then set down to here. These are meant to represent, if you're doing an ad hoc LZ, headlights of cars on low. Don't point them at the middle of the landing zone, point them at the edge of the landing zone to eliminate the landing zone. If you're at a permanent pad, normally there'd be enough ambient lighting from the clinic or wherever you are, the town or the village, that you won't need something like this. LZ don'ts. So once the fire department did an auxiliary, they put people here. Don't do that. The only person that should be, there should only be one person close to here. That's the LZ manager. Everybody else should be well clear there. And permanent pads, you may, it's probably a good idea to try and have somebody out there talking to the helicopter, but you don't, it's not always required, but it's a good idea. If it's a permanent pad, like if there's some places that have areas they use regularly that aren't helipads, there it's probably a good idea. It's always a good idea to have an LZ manager. If you've got a pad that like Takla where it's right beside the clinic, probably don't need an LZ. You probably can get away without an LZ manager. You have so far anyway. Don't shine lights directly. Okay, so here's LZ manager. You can sort of see they've got it marked out. This is just a practice area on the grass here with these little cones. You can see the LZ manager would have had his hands above his head. Then he points straight out. This is the direction, the center of the landing area. He's got his reflective vest on, and the only other thing I'm going to mention here, long sleeves, even in the summertime, long sleeves and long pants are really what you want, just for protection in case there's a fire, God forbid. But eye protection is a big one. One thing that you may or may not realize is helicopters cannot see very well behind them. There's sometimes these tiny little mirrors that are convex, so that the objects are closer than they appear, but it's really hard to see anything behind the helicopter. And the nose is pointed up, so it's and the pilots are usually concentrating, looking forward and maybe to the side. If you're in, particularly you're in an ad hoc LZ, but even in, I'm thinking of like Takla, you have a small kid, for whatever reason, decides to start running up to the helicopter refined, or a dog, or a horse, or some sort of wildlife. The pilots aren't going to see that coming from behind. And this is where it would be a good idea to have somebody there that would be calling an abort. Basically, don't land here for now. There's something behind you that you can't see. that you shouldn't land here right now. But that's why the importance of eye protection. If your eyes are closed because all the dust and everything as the helicopter comes into land here, you close your eyes, that's not helping the pilots.
Are you still there, Ian? Can everyone hear me?
Could hear you in RGB.
Yes, I can hear you, Casey.
Yeah, I wonder if we've just temporarily lost Ian. He may have taken a call. I'm checking the chat. And I think he was pretty much close to the end of his presentation. Apologies for the minor glitch. Greg, should we screen share and start your presentation and see if we can get Ian back? If you want to screen share.
Sure, that sounds good. Again, my name is Greg Shea. I'm with the First Nations Health Authority. Really pleased to participate today and learn from Ian and all the information that he shared. I have a brief presentation, just 8 or 9 slides. So I'll share my screen. So hopefully everyone can see that. With a thumbs up, Casey, can you see that? Great stuff. And because there are just a few small number of slides, I do really welcome questions along the way. You know, we can talk about anything. So maybe the first couple of slides started with an acknowledgement of need. In our review of this and our experience with this, we note there are jurisdictional and program gaps to fund the assessment, the construction, and the ongoing maintenance of emergency evacuation infrastructure very broadly. I know we're here talking today about helicopter landing pads, but that could extend, you know, to all different types of emergency infrastructure. We acknowledge that many, if not most, or perhaps all, BC First Nations communities are negatively impacted by these gaps. And I think when we had the introductions this afternoon, you know, I was listening to many of you identifying the needs, trying to figure out how to make this happen for your communities. The other thing that we know, there's a fair bit of variability out there. We have done reviews of emergency evacuation infrastructure across the province, and there are many types of infrastructure that exist, and some that's really well done, and then there are some instances where there are just large gaps. And ultimately, the gaps in this infrastructure and these important investments means that evacuations are occurring in higher risk situations. And I think that that has been described with some of the good landing zone procedures here that have been, the information that's been shared. But in the absence of that knowledge, there are higher risk situations where helicopters are landing, they're trying to save people's life. And so just acknowledging the situation, I would also like to just advise and confirm that FNHA, we're not funded to support the development or the maintenance of the infrastructure, but we acknowledge and recognize that many emergencies are health and safety related, which is very much what we're funded to do. Over the years, we've had many communities come to FNHA seeking support around Helipad or infrastructure. And because it was something that we didn't know a lot about, and it's not something that we had done in the past, we undertook a project to learn, to begin developing some capabilities and some understanding. it's had a couple of phases. So we started this about 3 years ago. In 2021, we engaged a couple of professional services firms to help us just learn about air evacuation infrastructure, the different types, the pros and cons, help us understand the regulatory environment, because it is complex. And I think Ian was referring to that earlier. We wanted to develop some information resources around community-based site assessments, and also to do some high-level costing around what does it cost to do this type of infrastructure if we were to work towards developing a program to support First Nations communities. And based on that learning, we were able to secure a small amount of funding to do some demonstration work. And to support that, we have Scott here today from Colliers Project Leaders. And so Colliers has been providing project management support to the work that we've done so far. Vertiflight provides a technical expertise around the design of these heliports. And Helicopters Without Borders, which is the nonprofit associated with Helijet, has been provided, helicopter services, and also a lot of other support type of services to a number of communities, both in the interior, but largely along the coast. And a little bit in the north as well. So the types of things that we have done, we've completed some heliport assessments. We've done some renovations to existing heliports and did one kind of demonstration project, which we're concluding. We have supported the establishment of a number of interim sites, and we're developing the concept of a landing plate, or just basically providing information so that the air ambulance providers have a lot of good information about that particular site, and you can get into their catalog, if you will, and it's a known location that they can use in their operations. We've also been purchasing and providing radios with the proper cord, the frequency that was talked about earlier, and turbo flares to support communities. We have done the helipad assessments. So in total, we've had a privilege of being in 20 communities so far. We've got 13 interim heliport locations confirmed, supporting some construction activities. Some of them do require a bit of clearing or related enhancements. And landing plates, we're trying to register as many as we can and continue to strive to do more. And 10 communities have the radios and the turbo flares. The types of works in the top left is the renovation project. I don't think that one's showing a final picture. It doesn't show the lights, but that was the first one that we were able to partner with community. They had an existing landing pad, but it was a bit small for today's aircraft and in disrepair. So we were able to do the assessment and partner on some of the funding for construction. The community also contributed. The picture in the middle was an emergency repair. This particular community is in a high-risk situation for floods, and they had an existing wooden structure that was funded historically from Indigenous Services Canada. In this scenario, we did the assessments and were able to work with ISC to find a funding source to make an emergency repair. They do need a longer-term scenario for the community. And over at the right, we've tried to make, just take a lot of the community identifier information out, but that's an example landing plate that's been, I guess, heavily redacted, but just a bit information that goes in the book so that those air ambulance operators have good information about that particular landing site. We are working on documents like this that very much like the documents you're seeing today that support community in the deployment of these assets. And so for the turbo flares, we are just finalizing this document, if you will, but talks about how to use them and what happens if some of the batteries are dead or they're all not working. What's the minimum number? What is the layout procedure? Very similar to what Ian was sharing as well. An emergency radio information sheet and some things, a little quick checklist that might be there. We are working on a landing zone type of document as well that we'll definitely collaborate with Ian and team on to make sure it's consistent and supportive of the information that's been shared today. And we've had one demonstration project in community. We have found that in some of the remote locations, it's really expensive to bring in the concrete and the asphalt and have crews in community. If, there's sometimes accommodations are tight. And to address that, we ran a procurement process to develop a landing pad kit. So in scenarios where you can get a high quality heliport built at a more economical price point, it's still certainly not cheap by any stretch of the imagination, but it can be. It wouldn't be always, but it can be more economical depending on the logistics of the particular location. And so we're super excited to have this particular one just about completed. And it's a combination of a bit of an elevated pad. So there's two types of designs. One is that would sit on the ground and one is more elevated. And it's a bit of a hybrid in our first project where we use piles and it's largely ground level. There's a small lip, but not much. But it is also elevated where it's not resting permanently on the ground. It does have piles. And, in this example, there's wind socks and we've painted poles to make sure those obstacles are, very clear. And so we're very excited about that particular project. And so that concludes the quick FNHA update, and I welcome any questions.
So if people can, do you want to stop sharing screen, Greg? I can see more hands raised. If you're on the phone, please jump in or raise your hand if you have a question on the FNHA presentation, as Ian will finish his presentation right after this. I have a quick question if no one does, and perhaps you or Ian can cover it, but the wind socks, are those still kind of recommended as well as a visual?
It is something that we are including in our designs, but Ian, I welcome your thoughts on that as from an operator perspective.
Yeah, I definitely recommend a windsock, just so that it just looks quick and easy way to know where the wind's coming from. Because like I said, we always like to approach into wind or know, and the windsock is a good way to tell which direction it's coming from and how strong it is. Because the windsock sort of, have you ever seen the rings on a windsock, the red and white? Each ring is normally 5 knots of wind speed. So if it's standing straight out, it's about 30 or 40 knots of wind speed, if I can't remember how many rings there are.
Thank you, Greg. And as you develop your materials in coordination with Ian, it'd be nice if we can access them. I think our preparedness team will probably put them to good use if they're talking to communities in their emergency plans.
That's a great effort that FNHA is doing. It's really, really helping sort of standardize, and it gives our helicopter pilots a lot of confidence when they're going in to say, hey, this community, it's been assessed. This is what they've done, and this is what has been done, and to make sure that it's safe.
Thank you. There's 2 questions in the chat, and then I'll go to the hands. First question: where can wind socks be ordered? Ours is ripped to pieces.
Funny you should mention that. Who's it? Edward. Greg, I don't know if you guys have a source, but somebody else contacted me recently, and I went to the person that manages the Fraser Health Hospital helipads to see what his source was, but I don't know if you guys or Colliers have had a source of those.
Yeah, we can get back to you on that. I don't have it right off the top, but that's something that we can certainly connect back on.
Casey, when I get an answer for that other person, I can forward it to you too.
Perfect.
And Greg, if you're interested in it, I can also forward that to you if you're
Yeah,
interested.
yes, please. Yeah, that
Okay.
would be good.
Right
And
back.
Scott, can we also take that as an action just to share with Casey, you know, where we are purchasing?
Yeah, got it.
Thank you
And
so
then
much.
one more question in the chat. If fuel storage is fuel storage something that should be considered for remote locations?
Right now, there's no need for that that I can see. It's if there was going to be fuel storage, we're going to put it on our contractor to do that. Fuel storage is a little bit of a tricky thing because you need to have the confidence that it needs to be aviation fuel, not your normal gas and or your normal gas that would go in your car. So it's a little bit of a specialty thing, and we put it on our contractor to do that if we think we needed it.
Thank you. And Christina Kelly, I see your hand raised.
Yeah, I was just curious, Greg, with the presentation there, you showed us about the helipad that you guys were working on. Do you have like a rough idea of the approximate cost to build one of these?
Yeah, it will vary, and depending on the ground and the site conditions. In terms of that kit approach, I would say it's, you know, there's different ways of doing it, but if you're doing a full one with an assessment, the kit, backup power, you know, hazard painting of poles, you may have some security fencing, you're in the $1 million range, and it can get 50% more than that if you're in a super remote location. Could you do it more economically with not having conduits poured in concrete and just doing a slab and those sorts of things? You certainly can. But to have a fully engineered, you know, long-term helipad, I need to confirm the helipad that we have built will take any mid-sized, I guess, aircraft that BC EHS currently uses in the province. So it's a design of the longest helicopter plus the heaviest. So a cormorant won't be able to land, but anything that the air ambulance has or has typically used in its fleet, it will take. So we are just really conscious of trying to, you know, we consider all the needs, if you will, and scenarios.
Thank you.
Thank you. One additional, question in the chat. At the top of the presentation, I think it was mentioned that hiring a consultant is required to move ahead with Helipad. Is that correct?
From an FNHA perspective, or just generally? Maybe, Ian, I'll leave that one with you.
Sure. Do you want me to talk to that?
Sure. Maybe this is a good segue to resume your presentation and answer that question. Yeah.
Sure. I'll sort of answer that question, then get back to the presentation. So the answer is preferably yes. And the reason I would say that is the worst case scenario is you go and invest a whole bunch of money in something, and then the helicopter comes overhead and says, "Nah, that's not going to work." Right? If you hire that consultant, that'll cost you some money, but it will also make sure that when the helicopter comes overhead, it's going to work for the helicopter, B, it's going to meet the Transport Canada safety requirements. So having said that, helicopters can land anywhere that's big enough, firm enough, and and not too sloped. But the hard part is, let's say you have, and all helipads need some sort of maintenance too, right? So it needs some sort of ongoing care and maintenance. So tackle landing. I know we talked with you guys at one point about you had to cut some brush back from around your helipad. You guys did, because it was starting to encroach on where the helicopter's tail was hanging over in the tail rotor. And you guys did that, and it's great, but that's just something you have to think about and do every year. Trees grow, bushes grow, things like that. And so both the environment around the pad has to be maintained, and then also the pad itself. So I think that, Greg, you had the example of the wooden pad, I think that was sort of needed some emergency repairs. Wood is great because it goes up relatively quickly, cheaply, and everything, and it can take a load, but then it needs more maintenance probably than asphalt or concrete or something like that, which is more expensive upfront, but then maybe not as expensive to maintain down the line. Does that sort of, who's it, Jenny Gunn? Does that sort of, hopefully that sort of answers your question. It's definitely a preferred to hire the consultant to make sure that the job's done right.
Yes, thank you so much.
I might add just a couple of things too. A consultant might be able to work with the community to identify multiple locations. And if your goal is to have a long-term site, you might need to have an interim site, and they may be actually different. And think through understanding where you're planning to develop, because we've had in those assessments where we'll work with community. They might want it initially here, and then we're like, oh yeah, but we're soon going to have a development there, and you really don't want the aircraft coming and taking off and landing over buildings or houses, and you try to find a safe space. And so it is a bit of a conversation that they can work with you to look at different options and land on that right location, if you will. Pun intended.
Okay, I'll try and share my screen again. Yes, for some reason I had a power outage, which was and then I lost my internet, but the power came back on shortly thereafter. I think I am sharing there again. Yes, should be good.
You're good. And I can't recall in terms of hazards. Have you talked about people flying drones?
That is coming up.
Okay.
That is, oh no, so I want to do full screen mode. There we go. I think I belabored this enough. Big one, wear eye protection so that you're not closing your eyes when the helicopter comes into land. Just so that you can see and you can warn them about anything coming up from behind. Talked about the main rotor. So this is the 76 that flies out of Vancouver and Rupert has a particularly lower rotor than the other ones. This one is at its lowest extent. So if the pilot took his control and pushed it all the way forward, this is how low it could go. This guy's a little bit over 6 feet tall. So this is why you never, ever, ever want to get near the helicopter when it's turning. Because it could potentially go this low. Yeah, just wait for it to stop. And then even after it stopped, don't go in until the pilot calls you in. Tail rotors go about 5 to 6 times faster than the main rotor. They turn 5 to 6 times faster. They're pretty much invisible at night. You will hear them. The 902 doesn't have a tail rotor, but it does have a bunch of hot air coming out back there. But the good rule of thumb is don't go behind the landing gear ever. If you're going to go from one side of the aircraft to the other, go around the front, don't go around the back. And even the Ascent that runs the 902, they make a practice even on the 902 of going around the front and not the back, because they have a whole bunch of helicopters that do have tail rotors and they don't want to get in the bad habit of doing it around that one particular helicopter. Yeah. Pitot tubes, these are these little things sticking out at the front of the helicopter here. Some people think they look like machine guns. What they are is to measure the airspeed on the helicopter. Anytime below about 10 degrees Celsius outside air temperature, these things will be on. They'll turn on the heat on them. If you touch them, they could actually blister the skin or burn like like a pair of leather work gloves. They could actually burn a hole through it. And these things are also easy to catch on your clothing. So basically be very, very careful when you're walking around the aircraft with those things, especially right after it's touched down. Those could be very, very hot. Loose debris. So any of these things are bad for the helicopter. 4x8 sheets of plywood can go flying quite easily in that. Think about it, you have about 12,000 pounds of force that's holding the helicopter in the air right when it comes down on the ground. That 12,000 pounds can push quite a bit of force. Open doors on vehicles is another good example. If somebody's hand could get caught in something, or it could rip a door off, and it can rip a door off a car, or at least bend the hinges the wrong way. So all these other things, tarps, blankets, canopies, signs, things like that. The danger here is well, for the plywood, it's that it's going to go fly and hit somebody or something and injure or damage somebody or something. These ones, part of the danger is it could do something to people, but the other thing is it gets circulated up in the downwash, comes back in the top, and then gets sucked in an engine intake or hits something a little bit more solid like this, wraps around the tail rotor, and it could be, if it gets sucked into the engine intake, causes the engine to hiccup, then the aircraft's basically down to one engine, and it won't be able to go anywhere. Or not anywhere. Yeah, it'll have to stay there until the engine gets fixed. The tail rotor one is the worst case scenario, because the tail rotor stops the aircraft from spinning to the right uncontrollably. And so if it damaged the tail rotor, it would do that, and the helicopter could crash. That's why all these, you want to make sure anything that could get picked up by 12,000 pounds of force of wind is well tied down or well far away from wherever your helicopter's landing. Yeah. Animals. So talked about noise. It's obviously noise around the helicopter. Ear defenders are a very good idea if you're going to be anywhere. You're going to be the LZ manager. They have had some cases of animals. Most animals will run away from the loud noise. They have had some cases of animals running towards the helicopter. If you have livestock or anything around where your landing areas is, please have a fence between them and your landing area so that the livestock or the animals can't run towards the helicopter. If you're going to stop it on the road, if you're doing an ad hoc one, basically stop the traffic on both sides of the road. You might be able to see here where the blades are hanging over a little bit on this side. They're going to let one lane of traffic go by. You can see the poles and the lines on this side here, but they're on the far side, so that's fine. And this is the smaller helicopter too. This is an example of something, so this would be well within the landing point, then the 40 meters would be extend out to this side of the road and out to the trees on this side. But the landing point, this is an example of something like, it's probably up to, between your knee and your waist, but it's really solid, really heavy. The rotor wash isn't going to blow it down. And that's okay within that landing point if you have something like that. But you can't have too many of these. If you had a lot of these things in random locations, the helicopter wouldn't be able to land. But one long line of it, that's fine. If you started to have those signs that you see sometimes hanging off these in the middle of it, that wouldn't be okay because that's probably too high for the helicopter. Anything sort of 1 or 2 knee height to waist height kind of things are okay, or a few of those, especially if they're clustered in one area and the helicopter can land away from it. That's fine, but as soon as you get too many of those, it doesn't work. Talked about hazards of dust and snow, brownout and whiteout. So this is what happens, and I've got a video showing a bit of this too. If you've got a lot of dust or snow, basically the helicopter rotor wash will start kicking up dust or snow from the ground. And the worst case scenario is they get totally enveloped by it like this. And let's say there's a tree over here, you lose your references and you start drifting and you don't realize you're drifting and you run into the tree or something solid. And that's the worst. That's why you need to let the pilots know if there's a lot of dust or snow on the ground. If you have a fire truck that can wet down the dust, like 5 minutes or less before the helicopter lands, wet it down. Otherwise, pack the snow down if you have ability to do that. If you don't have either of those, warn the pilots about it because they can sometimes take some measures to minimize that. I'm going to show you this little video I already queued up here. Where was it? No, in here. There we go. Of this. And so here's an example of the downdraft. You can see it picking up here in the thing, and you'll see it come and pick up. Fortunately, it's not too thick here. And you can see this guy's running away because there's no way he's going to be able to look at the helicopter with any sort of dust. But that's, again, the importance of eye protection. And then watch as it comes over here. It's going to start picking up some cardboard or wood or something like that. And see, you can barely see the helicopter there now. See, this guy's trying to take a picture. Yeah, dumb idea. Don't do that. And there you see that big piece of tarp or something like that got picked up. That's, yeah. Okay, let's go back to this one. Drones. And you were asking just about that there, Casey. So they have seen more and more drones, particularly around accident scenes on highways. And so the scenario where a lot of times the guys in the interior will see drones are 1 lane each way, highway, bad traffic accident, traffic stopped for quite a while, for potentially hours sometimes, right? And somebody says, I wonder what's happening up there. Hey, I've got a drone in my car. In the back of my car. I'm going to just fly it up there to see what's going on because they don't even see they can't potentially even see what's going on. And that's a scenario where if you see or hear a drone and you're on the radio with the helicopter, warn them about the drone because they definitely won't hear it in the helicopter, and it would be it's really, really hard to see. If you know who's operating the drone, or you can find out, please get them to land it or get it on the ground so that it's not a threat to the helicopter, because that's one where can cause a very bad day. The helicopter runs into it, sucks parts down in the engine intake, causes some damage to the tail rotor blades or something like that, and then the helicopter's grounded. Patient's not going anywhere. Worst case scenario, it causes a crash. But yeah, drones are definitely an issue. So let's say you've selected your LZ, or you have your LZ already because you've got a permanent one. You've gone around, taken a look to make sure there's nothing there that's going to get picked up by the rotor downwash. It's always a good idea to do one quick, if you're the LZ manager, even for a prepared one, take one quick boo around, walk around your LZ, make sure there's nothing that's accumulated over the last few weeks before the last landing. And then, okay, everything's ready. You're on the radio. You've talked to the helicopter. You know they're inbound. They're coming inbound. They've done they might have done an orbit overhead to take a look at things, assess the wind, and they're coming in for their approach. And something like this, you see them. They're pointed nose up. You're looking out for the hazards. You've got your eye protection on so that you can see it. And then all of a sudden, you see from behind there's a child or a dog or something like that running up from behind. The helicopter doesn't see it. Call your on the radio, abort, abort, abort 3 times, or you wave your arms, cross your arms overhead. I prefer the radio personally because of the pilot's not looking at you at the time. They will hear it on the radio, and then they will overshoot. They'll go overhead, and actually, I think that's the next slide. Yeah, if they overshoot and abort, stay on your PEPCORD 1. Air to grounds in the econ coverage area on the lower mainland. Don't pay any attention to that. All of you guys will be on PEPCORD 1. And talk to the helicopter about why you called for the abort. They'll say, oh, you can say, hey, it was a dog. Somebody's got the dog. Dog's not going to be an issue now. Or I saw this tarp that I didn't see that was started flapping up. I'm not sure it's tied down. I'm just going to go check that. Okay, it's tied down. Let's do another landing. So that's where having that radio really, really helps to basically sort out things like that. Yeah, this one only applies in the lower mainland, really, so that it won't apply to you guys. After landing, protect the LZ. This is mostly for the ad hoc ones, because if you're on a vehicle or like a road intersection or something like that, you want to maybe start letting some vehicles through, but not others. But you're going to have to protect the helicopter, keep somebody away from the praying in the rotors. Stay clear till it stop turning. Wait. Sometimes in the summertime, you will see the doors get popped open when it's really warm because they want a little bit of airflow. In the helicopter, there's air conditioning normally, but as soon as they turn off the engines or turn off one of the engines, the air conditioning stops. But just because they pop the doors open doesn't mean approach the helicopter. Just wait till you get an all clear, or everything stops. 1, everything stops turning, and 2, the pilots give you the sign to come in. Pilots love to talk about the helicopter and show you around if they have time. If you're the fire department there particularly, talk to them because you can say, hey, if there's worst cases of crash, here's the emergency shutoffs, here's how to jettison the doors to get access to the people inside, that sort of thing. They would particularly show you those things. Or here's some of the dangerous stuff on the helicopter. Here's where the oxygen bottles are. There's magnesium in certain parts of the aircraft, that sort of thing. Continuity of care. If you're at a health clinic, they're obviously going to go into the clinic to seek out the doctor or the nurse to basically find out the story on the patients before they put them into the aircraft. If you're at an ad hoc location, whoever's providing the primary care for the patient at the site, they'll basically want a concise history to the best of your knowledge of the patient history and their vitals. They may ask for assistance loading the patient. But basically wait for them to ask for you or ask for help, or you can offer to help, but let them say yes. Don't sort of jump in there unless they ask for you to help. Yeah, do not put anything in the helicopter, because if you put it in the wrong spot, they may be looking for something, and certain like the 76 in Rupert has a rear cargo that you can't access in flight. And if it's something they need in flight, they're going to want to make sure to put it in the cabin as opposed into the rear baggage compartment. Same thing, don't open or close any aircraft doors unless you, or just don't close any or because it's very easy to force the doors open or close, and then break the door, and then the airplane can't go, or the helicopter can't go flying with a broken door. And so it's very, very easy to do that by mistake. So just don't open or close any doors. For takeoff, if you're the LZ manager here, take take a look. It's not unknown for them to forget something outside the helicopter. It does happen from time to time. They're in a rush, they're trying to get things going. They'll leave something on the ground right outside the helicopter. They leave a strap hanging outside the door after it's closed. There was one case where helicopters flying around, they heard this sort of tunk, tunk, tunk. And it was one of the seat belts that was hanging, the solid metal part was hanging outside the helicopter with the door closed. Wasn't one of the seat belts they needed to be strapped into. And it was banging itself against the side of the aircraft and put a couple of holes in the skin of the aircraft. Basically try and keep your LZ secure for about 5 minutes and stay on the radio about 5 minutes afterwards, because if anything happens after they depart, they know they just landed where you were. If there's any issues with the aircraft, one of the things they're probably going to do is return right back where they took off from. And so it would be helpful for about 5 minutes just to hang around. Hard landing or crash, don't approach until everything stopped moving. It is possible for the engines to keep running after the tail rotor and main rotors have stopped. If that's the case, if you've talked to the pilots, there's usually two big red handles right in between the two pilots on the ceiling. If you can get in there, jettison the door and pull those things, that will cut off the fuel to the engines. Dangerous stuff on the helicopter, oxygen bottles, obviously. There's installed, basically aircraft oxygen plumbed into the aircraft, sort of like a ground ambulance. And then sometimes there's portable oxygen bottles too. So there could be both of those. There's magnesium in the gearbox because it's a lighter metal, but once it catches on fire, there's no putting that out unless, I think there's some specialized stuff you need for that. And then there's also nitrogen bottles, compressed gas for floats for the aircraft that are on the coast. Seasonal considerations. I think the only thing I'm going to go is talk about ice here. Non-level ice covered surfaces. All your helipads should be nice and level. Shouldn't be a problem. But ice covered surfaces, if you have ice on them, this is one thing where winter maintenance is important. Making sure the snow is cleared off. Ideally, there's no ice on it. The problem with ice is that, the Newton's second law, every action, there's an equal opposite reaction. So when you're starting up the helicopter, the torque from the main rotor starting up can cause the body to rotate the other way if there's not sufficient friction holding the helicopter down. That's where you want to really try and take the ice off the surface. And then same thing when you're putting the rotor brake on, it can cause the aircraft to rotate the other way if there's not sufficient friction. And I've got an example of this guy basically landed here and slid back this way. This tree is way too tall. I don't like this should only be about this tall in my mind. And then this is all really, really tight. Yeah, this person slid backwards on this little tiny bit of a slope into there, and you can see what happened there. And I also have this other video, which is another one about ice. Where is it? This one. Let's see. And you can see this guy, he's sitting down at his heel. And when we're looking at people, these people up here are fine. They're, I think, far enough from the helicopter landing area at the front. I don't know why these people, it looks like a bunch of snowboarders just sitting there. They are way too close, in my opinion, to the helicopter landing area. It looks like there's a small rope sort of separating them. But then watch what's about to happen here. I might just forward it a bit. Yeah, see him starting to slide backwards. And then this becomes a very, very sad, because he's shut his engines down, so he can't take off again, and his rotor's just slowing down. And if you heard the guy taking this video, I don't know why he isn't jumping behind shelter somewhere. I would not be still taking that, but he's basically saying F word, F word, F word, F word the whole time this is happening. And you can sort of see, I think I'll jump forward here. Oh yeah, so there you see there's a very expensive helicopter with a snowmobile stuck in the back. Yeah, and that's sort of it sliding along the thing there. Oops, sorry. I think. Yeah. Anyway, so be careful with ice, especially on sloped surfaces. Get back to the main presentation here. But if your helipad is nice and level, you shouldn't have that problem. But again, ice with in the wintertime, starting up and shutting down the helicopter can be an issue, causing it to rotate. So LZ operations team effort. It's particularly ad hoc LZs are probably one of the most sort of riskiest things we do, in the sense that you're landing at a different place every time and you're not sure what's there. That's why it's nice to have the helipads, either a permanent or location that you're always going to use that's sort of dedicated to that, even if it's not a helipad, that can work. But we would really prefer the effort that FNHA is going through with something full-time, dedicated, and built to purpose for the helicopters, because that's the safest way of doing it. This is our generic email. I put the on-call manager monitors this. I put my own email in there for anybody if you have any follow-up questions. And Casey, I don't know, were there any chat questions that I might have missed?
Just having a look now. Not that I could see. If you can stop screen sharing. By a show of hands, unless you're on the phone, are there any questions on Ian's presentation? I know it's a lot of information.
And I'm sorry to pick on Tackler for you guys, but I was there, so it was clear in my head what your scenario is there.
I guess I do have a brief question. Is there any material that's like an FAQ for either staff within a band office, whether it's health, or it could be an emergency operations center staffer, or even for families that might be having one of their relatives transferred out? Is there like a simple little FAQ for what they should know?
What questions or what information are you sort of thinking of? I know, Greg, that Ken contacted me about a document, doing up a little bit of a document, and I gave him some feedback on something that he'd done up. But so maybe that might sort of fill a bit of that need. And Ken was one of the contractors working for Greg.
Yeah, anything that's additional communication, I think, would be helpful.
And I think what Ken did was he took this presentation, he tried to condense it down into something smaller and shorter.
Yeah, that is our interest, to create more of an infographic that could be laminated. We can laminate or get them out, or it's a brochure that includes some of this information. I think maybe what we can do as our action is to get those mocked up, but work with Ian, make sure it's got the landing zone stuff right. And maybe Casey work with you as well to get your feedback, and if there's any FAQs or other pieces. But I think we're happy to collaborate and get some good products developed and available.
And same here, happy to help out with that, because the more information, the good information we get out there, the better, hopefully.
That sounds good. Cindy, I see your hand raised, and then we'll go to Trudy after.
Okay, I just had a question about the fuel storage for remote places, and just keep in mind Clementon is very remote, and seeing if there's a requirement for extra storage for fuel if that was necessary. And also with the presentation, it's a 61-page presentation, but I was checking for permission to print it off for people that usually help us with medevacs.
No problem from my perspective printing it off. It's on our public facing webpage. You can download it and print it off as to your heart's content. Every once in a while I do update it. So you might want to check back and see which version we're on. But yeah, no problems printing out. And then the other question was fuel. Clem2, you guys are actually relatively close to Bella. Is it correct me if I'm wrong?
That's correct.
Yeah. And so it's funny, I was just doing some sums and looking at distances to Clem2 and just for that reason. And if we ever needed fuel, we'd just pop over to Bella and get it at the airport there.
Thank you for that. Trudy, you have a question?
Yeah. I had to step away for a phone call. I might have missed it. But what is the limit of visibility that you need for flight?
So that's sort of like how long is a piece of rope question. It really, so normally it's supposed to be 1,000 feet ceiling and 3 miles of visibility. They do have authorization from Transport Canada, permission to go down to 0.5 mile. in certain situations, but that's going to really depend on and realizing so where they take off, the weather could be a certain situation, where you are or the patient is could be another situation, and then there's the weather in between, which could vary significantly from both of the former, both the where they depart and where they're picking up. So they have to have the confidence that the weather is going to be good enough both for the and for the duration of the trip to go pick up the patient and come back to or drop off the patient wherever, if it's a third location. And so half mile is really, really low, and they usually like, especially at night, and at night it needs to be higher, sorry, on the night vision goggles, because remember that thing I mentioned about visual acuity not being as good on night vision goggles. So it can really depend. And the hard part for us in BC is, the mountains are beautiful, glaciers are beautiful, the coastline is beautiful, but it's some of the most varied weather in Canada to fly around, particularly in the wintertime. And we've got a lot of vertical surfaces of granite, which if you have an accident, it's usually a very bad accident. So sometimes they tend to be a little bit more conservative when they're flying. Whereas if you're on the prairies, when you crash, there's flat field to fly into to land on. Here, there's not as much of that. So sorry, I can't give you a definitive answer, but yeah, it's usually 1,000 feet and 3 miles is what they're supposed to do. They can go down to 500 feet and half a mile, but once you're down at that 500 feet and half a mile, you have to be turning around and going somewhere else and doing something, because you're probably not going to be able to continue where you're going. Does that sort of answer your question, Trudy? Was it Trudy or Cindy? I can't remember who asked the question now.
That's me. No, that's good. Thank you.
Okay.
Excuse me. Any final last minute questions of either presentation? I know we've covered a lot of ground and had some good discussion. And it's okay if not. I'd like to thank FNHA and BC Emergency Health Services, and for everyone that's making the time today for all the good questions and comments. And we can reclaim another 7 minutes of our day.
Okay.
So
and thank you for organizing, Casey.
And thank you, Ian. Thank you, Greg, and FNHA Company.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good day, everyone.
Have a good one.